So this is how this class picking guide is going to go down. First we'll cover the major class changes, new abilities, and then give you the honest truth to the question that you really care about the most: is the class actually any good, and will I get invited to groups? But firstly, we have to establish the big class changes across the board that appear in Cataclysm. There are now armor specializations in the game, meaning you gain a boost to your primary stat if you equip the highest level armor you are allowed to equip. For instance, a warrior gets a boost if they equip only plate, and a druid will get their boost if they only equip leather, meaning it's no longer viable to equip different types of armor regardless of the stats. Many stats have been in fact removed from gear, like for instance attack power, spell power, which is now combined into intellect apart from on weapons, armor pen and shield block value are now seen on talents only. MP5, block rating, defense, and weapon skill are now totally removed. These stats have been swapped with the new mastery stat, provides a more specific class bonus to each individual spec. For instance, the Unholy DK gets a boost to their shadow and pet damage, and a Holy Priest mastery causes their direct heals to heal for a portion of their heal as a hot over 4 seconds. There's also a lot more stamina on gear. You will notice that your HP pool in this expansion will be dramatically larger than Wrath Classic. By the way guys, I've just made a Cataclysm pre-quest stacking guide. It will get you to level 81 before you even hit the Cataclysm zones. This way you can go and hit Uldum or Stonecore to get ahead of everyone. Don't worry for leveling on a fresh character, because I've got you covered too. To get the guide, just subscribe to the channel, check out my channel page, and you'll see it in the description of my subscriber only video. The first major change to Death Knight is how runes work. No longer do your runes individually regenerate on their own cooldown. If you use one blood rune with one blood strike, it will regenerate instantly, but the second blood rune that you use with the second blood strike will not instantly regenerate. It will wait until the first blood rune is fully regenerated before it will begin to regenerate. You can have one of each rune type regenerating at once, so a total of 3. Haste can now also speed up rune regeneration. Blood has now become a dedicated tank spec. Without specking into Blood, you won't get the essential mastery stat that gives a Blood DK his own bubble effect when he heals with Death Strike. Bone Shield is now a blood ability. It reduces damage by 20% as long as you have a charge and the cooldown is 1 minute. They also gain a buff to Icebound Fortitude up to 50% damage reduction. They're a very strong top tier tank, and you can have a lot of fun soloing old raids for transmog and gear. Some people even regard Blood DK as the best tank of this expansion. The new Death Knight abilities are Outbreak, a ranged ability that applies both of your dots, Necrotic Strike, a health absorption strike, and Dart Simulacrum, a debuff you apply to the enemy that steals the next spell they use. Honestly, Frost is largely unchanged apart from Unbreakable Armor being swapped with Pillar of Frost, and some other minor tweaks. It's more of a middle of a pack DPS that is outshined by the Unholy DK. And now for the true Death Knight spec, Unholy. Unholy gains a new ability, although it's not restricted to the Unholy tree, Festering Strike. This allows you to extend the duration of your dots, making snapshotting more viable. They can now empower their ghoul with a Dark Transformation ability after you've used 5 Death Coils, and Holy Frenzy is now an Unholy ability only, and it can actually be cast on your ghoul, gargoyle, or another friendly party member. They are very strong top DPS, very likely one of the top 3 DPS in the game. They are formidable in PvP with talents like Resilient Infection, returning runes when your diseases are dispelled, and Death's Advance. You cannot be reduced below 75% of normal run speed, while both of your Unholy runes are being depleted. As you guys know, I'm a little biased towards the Unholy DK. It's my favourite class. The reason why I love it so much is because it's a balance of fun, action-packed melee playstyle that you normally experience while playing a warrior, but it's mixed in with some technicality and pet control, and you get to live the class fantasy of playing as an evil badass. What more could you want? Now, by far the fastest way to level up in Cataclysm Classic is with a solid step-by-step leveling guide. Luckily, Rested XP has got your back. The world record holding speed levelers have been working on the fastest route for months now. The guide is ready for a pre-order. I'd really appreciate it if you checked out the link in the description, because it really supports this channel more than you could think. The main mechanical change for Druid is going to be the Balanced Druid. They finally now get their proper Eclipse mechanic. This is essentially a separate resource system visible on your unit frames. The same principle applies though. You swap between casting nature and arcane abilities. They now also get Solar Beam, a vital ability in the battlegrounds to win teamfights, because it's an AoE silence that lasts on the ground for 10 seconds. True Form is no longer a permanent form and is now on a cooldown. The new Druid abilities are Stampeding Roar, a party-wide movement speed increasing buff, Wild Mushroom, you basically grow mushrooms on the enemy target that later explode after 1 second and reduce movement speed. And there's also Thrash, another ability for the Feral Druid. Druids can now also remove magic, curse and poison effects with Remove Corruption talented. But what about viability? Well, honestly, the DPS specs in a serious raiding environment are middle of the pack. Obviously the Boomkin excels at AoE DPS, but a lot of the time killing adds on bosses doesn't actually count on Warcraft logs because it's considered padding. So you may find it a little bit harder honestly to find groups as a DPS Druid than many other classes. Druid healers and tanks are solid picks though. For PvP, the Feral Druid really is the spec that shines the most with a huge toolkit and very powerful bleeds. It is actually considered one of the best melee DPS for Arena. The main change for Hunter, you will likely already know, is the new focus resource. This means you will find yourself, similar to a rogue, waiting for enough focus to use an ability. However, you won't have these long phases of downtime or having to use a mana generating aspect like Aspect of the Viper to get your mana back. You'll also finally be able to use auto shoot while moving. Ammo is totally gone from the game and new hunters will start at level 1 with a pet, and it's going to be different depending on your race choice. Their new abilities are camouflage. While stationary, you're basically perfectly stealth like a rogue, but when you move you can slightly be seen, but you can only be targeted by melee attacks. Aspect of the Fox allows you to use steady shot and cobra shot while moving. Cobra shot is basically a new alternative to steady shot against heavily armoured targets. You'll also get Widow Venom, a non-cooldown mortal strike effect of 25% healing reduction. This is also the era where hunters will be summoning and dismissing pets very often, particularly in PvP, in order to benefit from different pet cooldowns, and many of the pets can provide the essential raid buffs and debuffs, making a hunter a solid addition to the raid. Instead of having one main pet and being able to just summon a stable pet every 5 minutes, you have the option to summon 5 different pets at once, whenever you want. Plus the stable is expanded dramatically. But are they good? Well, hunters are a top tier DPS in Cataclysm, but you're probably going to be playing survival spec for most of the time in raids, as the other specs, according to my research, just aren't very viable. In PvP, the hunter is considered by most to be a god tier class with their insane toolkits. The Mage get a lot more iconic spec specific cooldowns in Cataclysm, like for instance Flame Orb. It travels in the direction you are facing and lasers everyone in sight. You can also turn it into a Frost Fire Orb if you spec deep enough into the Frost Tree. Now as always, your PvE specs are Arcane and Fire, and Frost is your main PvP spec. They have changed slightly, namely Fire becoming more of a dot spec with a combustion rework that combines all of your burn effects on the target into a mega dot that can be spread to all nearby targets. Arcane attempts to have a bit more of a rotation by making Arcane Barrage and Missiles viable buttons to press, but you will still have that Arcane Blast bursting phase to maximise your DPS. They also now get Time Warp, an alternative to Bloodlust and Heroism, and there's also now Ring of Frost, an area of effect cooldown that freezes everyone within it. Now the Mage are god tier in PvE for Cataclysm, even without their legendary, and then when they get their legendary, they're just steamrolling everyone. They are top tier in PvP, but as always, they do require a very high skill ceiling. The Paladin also gets a new resource system in Cataclysm, that's Holy Power. Certain abilities generate it up to 3 stacks and others consume it, and the power is obviously dependent on how many stacks you have. This system favours all specs in its own unique way, and it makes a Paladin feel way more of a hybrid class. For instance, Word of Glory consumes Holy Power to do a heal, and it's not restricted to the Holy Paladin, and it's an instant cast, it can be used on the move. Their new abilities are Guardian of the Ancient Kings, a cooldown summon pet that changes depending on your spec. In Holy, the Guardian will duplicate your heals on the next 5 heals and also spread 10% of the heal to anyone within 10 yards. In Protection spec, he'll prevent incoming damage by 50%, and in Ret, both you and your Guardian abilities will increase strength by 1% per application. Plus, when the Guardian runs out, he will explode. Inquisition is a new buff you can apply to yourself for an increase of 30% holy damage. It is used with charges of Holy Power. Holy Radiance is a new AoE heal that is essentially swapping the old Wrath classic glyph for Holy Light. Divine Light is a new long cast big heal, and Paladins finally do get a kick called Rebuke. They are somewhere in between the middle of the pack and top of the pack. Obviously they're always excelling on those fights with cleave. Healers and tanks are obviously absolute top tier, and it goes without mentioning just how versatile the toolkit for the Paladin is. I don't think you're ever going to struggle to get a group as a Paladin. In PvP, the Holy Paladin are considered the second best healer, while Ret is also a top tier class with insane burst, tankiness and decent utility. In a way, the Shadow Priest gains a new resource system too, Shadow Orbs. When your Shadow Word Pain and mindfully deal damage, they will generate shadow orbs that increase the damage on other shadow abilities and are consumed in the process. Their new damage abilities are Mind Spike, an instant cast ability with a lot of damage, but it removes your dots on the target while increasing the crit chance of your next Mind Blast by 30%, stacking 3 times. Honestly, Shadow Priest like the Unholy Decay has to be one of the most unique and interesting playstyles I think Cataclysm has to offer. Along with the Warlock actually, but obviously we'll talk about that later. This expansion they also get the iconic ability Leap of Faith. Holy Priest will get the Chakra cooldown and it buffs other abilities when you cast them. Heal, Flash Heal, Greater Heal and Binding Heal get 10% increased crit chance, and it also refreshes your Renew. Prev Healing and Mending and Renew get increased healing by 15%, and also reduces the cooldown on Circle of Healing. And if you use it on Smite or Mind Spike, your damage will be increased 15%. It's why the Priest is probably considered one of the most aggressive DPS healers in Arena. Discipline Spec gets Power Word Barrier, an AoE bubble effect that reduces all damage friendly targets take within it by 25% and negates casting pushback. Priests are a top tier DPS and healer with loads of utility, so you shouldn't struggle to get a raid group. In PvP they are top tier all around. Now Rogue get a lot of quality of life changes in Cataclysm, allowing them to have way more freedom when picking their playstyle. Most abilities have had their weapon requirement removed, pointers now scale instead of having ranks, and abilities like Slice and Dice no longer require you to have a target. Their new abilities are Smoke Bomb. You pop it on a player and as long as they stay within it, they can't be healed by anyone else outside of it. They finally get a method of healing, Recuperate. You heal 3% health every 3 seconds and it lasts longer with more combo points that you have, up to 30 seconds. Combat Readiness is a defensive cooldown that deflects enemy weapon strikes, and Redirect can be used to transfer existing combo points to your current target. Revealing Strike in the combat tree increases the damage of a next finishing move by 35%. Vendetta in the assassination tree marks your target for death for 30 seconds, increasing all the damage you deal to the target and grants you vision of a target even if it goes stealth or invisible. Now rogues are top tier across the board pretty much as always, and you're going to be spending most of your time in assassination spec. Obviously they get access to their legendary daggers and by then they're very likely going to be the best DPS in the game. The biggest change for the Shaman is the new core mechanic behind empowering your weapon imbues with Unleash elements. With Wind Fury, you deal 175% of your weapon damage and your attack speed is increased on the next 6 swings. Weirdly for Rockbiter weapon, your threat is increased by 30% and your damage is reduced by 5%. I swear the Blizzard dev team were fighting over making a Shaman tank for World of Warcraft's lifetime, and they were only finally ever allowed to do it in Season of Discovery. Frostbrand weapon deals frost damage and slows the target even more. Flametongue weapon deals fire damage and increases the damage of your next spell by 20%, perfect for chaining with a nasty lava burst or chain lightning. Their new abilities are Spirit Walker's Grace, allowing you to cast while moving, Healing Rain, a new AoE heal that heals people when inside it, Primal Strike, a new fillet melee ability mainly used by enhancement, Earthquake is a new AoE DPS ability that deals damage to enemies inside it and has a 10% chance of knocking them down. You also get Bind Elemental to crowd control elementals. And lastly you have Totem of a Tranquil Mind. It's basically Concentration Aura but a totem. Elemental is a top tier DPS in Cataclysm, well top to middle tier, but unfortunately enhancement to be honest is a bit of an underperformer. You'll probably struggle to get groups unless they desperately need a Bloodlust. And for PvP it's not that much better, they are more of a middle of the pack PvP class all across the board. Warlock's a big glad to know that the Soul Shard system has totally changed. No longer are Soul Shards an item in your inventory, but a resource like Holy Power. That stacks to 3. You burn Soul Shard to buff the power of other abilities with Soul Burn, and abilities that cast Soul Shards previously like Summon Stone just simply don't cost a Soul Shard anymore. You can get free Soul Shards by using Drain Soul when a mob dies, or with Soul Harvest it grants you 3 shards every 30 seconds but can only be used outside of combat. If used on Drain Life, the cast time is reduced by 50%. If used on Teleport, it grants 50% increased movement speed. On Healthstone, the healing is increased by 20%. It can make Soulfire an instant cast and also increase the chance of Searing Pain critting by 100% for the next 6 seconds, and can also make your pet summons an instant cast. The first new ability is Demon Soul, a new big cooldown that's different depending on what pet you have, which are the following. For the Imp, increase crit chance on destruction spells by 20% for 20 seconds. Voidy, all threat you generate is transferred to the Void Walker for 15 seconds. Succubus, Shadowbolt damage increased by 10%. Fell Hunter, periodic shadow damage increased by 20%. And the Felguard, Spell haste increased by 15% and damage on fire and shadow increased by 10% for 20 seconds. And this cooldown is only on a 2-minute cooldown. Dark Intent is a buff you can apply to friendly party members including your pet. It increases both your haste by 3% and whenever the buff person does a crit, periodic damage or heal, you gain 3% more haste and they gain 1% and it stacks 3 times. There's also Fell Flame, an instant damage ability that increases the duration of Immolate and Unstable Affliction by 6 seconds. As you can see, Warlock is one of the more interesting and intricate classes that you can play Cataclysm. They are more of a scaling class to be honest. They begin at the middle of the pack, but by the end of Cataclysm they will be a top tier DPS. In PvP they deal great pressure, they're quite tanky for a caster, and therefore a top tier PvP class. Normally the story of the warrior is that you have to wait until the end of the expansion before they become viable, but this won't be the case in Cataclysm, as the arms warrior is a top tier DPS straight out of the gate. I mean, their mastery is an internal wind fury, so there's no wonder to be honest. Dual wielding one-handers will return to the playfield for people who want to do that option, with the optional talent Single-Minded Fury, and prop warriors now have a chance to critically block based on their crit chance, and the damage is pretty substantial for a tank. In this expansion they finally gain Heroic Leap, one of the most fun abilities in the game. Inner Rage reduces the cooldown of Heroic Strike and Cleave for 15 seconds, making it spammable, and a new melee ability with a built-in Sunder Armor effect is now available, Colossal Smash, meaning there'll be no more fighting over which warrior is stacking Sunder Armor. Throwdown is a new arms ability, it's a 5-second stun, and they also get a new minor DPS cooldown, Deadly Calm. You simply won't consume Rage for the next 10 seconds. Overall, you'll find the warrior to be a much more spammable and bursty class. The days of waiting for your rage to generate are over, to be honest. You'll be glad to know that they are a strong DPS start to finish, but you probably won't be able to play Fury until it scales better. Unfortunately in Cataclysm they are considered to be one of the worst melee DPS in PvP, and this is because they were strong in previous patches but they just got nerfed a lot. Be sure to stay tuned guys for more class videos. I've got loads coming up if you're still on the fence of what class to play. And please go and subscribe to my second channel. I've got a video over there where I attempt to complete the game Oblivion as the Adoring fan. I put a lot of work into it, so I would really appreciate it. But anyway, until my next video, ciao.